Hello, welcome back. Sorry if I sound terrible. I'm get sick. I have a sore throat. And I'm sorry I'm late. I am 10 minutes late, but I was in a Cutco meeting for 2 hours. So we went a little overtime. It's supposed to be done at 9, but we just barely finished. So here I am. Just came out of that meeting. Um, and so I'm sitting here holding my adorable sleeping baby. So cute. So I didn't get up and go get any cute jewelry stuff to show off, which, I kind of enjoy, but I don't have any of that. So we'll just, oh, sis, Kayla, so will you bring me the cord that phone's plugged into and unplug it and plug it in over here because this is about to die and I don't want to wake him up. Thank you. Thank you, Pumpkin. You're a sweetheart.
This thing's kind of in the way, though.
You can just kind of pull it out a little bit or push it this way. Yeah. Is it too heavy? It is heavy. Oh, there you go. You're tough. She's tough. There you go. You got plenty of room now. So I don't have anything to show off, but I will tell you what we did for dinner, and you can tell me what you did for dinner. It's been rainy here all day. Really rainy and foggy and beautiful, and I love soup on a rainy day. Thank you, sunshine. Yeah, right there. Plug it in. That'd be so sad if it died right in the middle of reading. Oh, come on. Oh, there we go. I got it. I didn't get it. Why is it not charging? It's not charging. Anyway, so I made clam chowder and baking powder biscuits. And then we got some fresh pineapple and bananas today. So I'm going to cut up some fruit before I go to bed and have a little fruit dessert, something. How come it's not charging? That's really weird. Sorry. Just trying to figure out why this. Okay, it's got power. Oh, I'm sorry, baby. Oh, I was trying so hard not to wake you up. I'm sorry. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I love you. Oh, just bothering him. Oh, there we go. Okay, it is charging. All right. Sorry about that. Uh-oh. Now he's awake. I disturbed him too much. It's okay, baby. Okay. I thought we were going to have such a nice, peaceful, quiet reading because he was asleep, but nope. Oh my goodness. Every time I tell you. Oh, sorry, I'm just waving all over the place. Trying to get this kid. And you're just going to sit there and listen to my baby cry. Sorry. Oh my goodness, I am sorry. It's rough. But he's settled down now. So my throat is getting sore. So I don't know how well we'll do. We'll do a chapter and see how it goes. And then if I'm good enough, we'll do another one. But I do have a sore throat, so we'll see. Okay, so I think what are we? We're chapter 16, I think. 16 and 17. So I lost my place. I need to make my bookmarks. I got a mold and everything to make bookmarkers, and I just need to make some cute ones and show them off. Okay, that's... No, I went way too far because that's chapter 11. Come on, I'm so lost. Chapter 12, 13. I'm just so not prepared. 14. And then we did 15, right? 14 and 15. Ah, found it. Chapter 16. Okay. So, a little recap. They went to their last event at the Ridotto or whatever it was, and they were going to go back to, what's it called? Howard Grove the next day, and there was this French woman that they ran into that had lost her group, her party, her people, and she was all stressed out. So Mrs. Mervyn, who's so very sweet, said, "Oh, well, we need to help her because she's in trouble." And so they bring her in the coach, and then the captain, he is a nasty piece of work. He's so mean. He can't stand her. He hates foreigners, so he's just treats her like garbage, and they hate each other, and they're fighting this French woman and him. And it comes to find out it's Madame Duval. It's Evelina's grandmother in the carriage with them. So now she can't leave because she can't leave London the very second she meets her grandmother there, and so now she's all stressed out, and they have to go visit. And anyway, it's a rough situation. Excuse me. Hopefully my voice will hold out. I sound rough. I'm sorry. Letter 14 or 16. Sorry, it's Roman numerals, and I get a little confused sometimes. It's not numbers, and I have to remember how to read them. Evelina to the Reverend Mr. Villers. Queen Anne Street, Thursday morning, April 14th. Let me have a sip of tea. Let me see if that'll help, because I sound like a frog. I have some throat tea here. Hopefully that helps. Before our dinner was over yesterday, Madame Duval came to tea, though it will lessen your surprise to hear that it was near 5 o'clock, for we never dine till the day is almost over. She was asked into another room while the table was cleared, and then was invited to partake of the dessert. She was attended by a French gentleman, whom she introduced by the name of Monsieur Dubois. Mrs. Mervyn received them both with her usual politeness, but the captain looked very much displeased, and after a short silence, very sternly said to Madame Duval, "Pray, who asked you to bring that there spark with you?" "Oh," cried she, "I never go nowhere without him." Another short silence ensued, which was terminated by the captain's turning...
and subscribe.
That's right. Like and subscribe. Do like the video. It helps. Like, if people watch and nobody leaves likes, then the YouTube algorithm is like, oh, people don't like this content. So, like it, and then, because I'd actually make money off this channel if I get enough. Like, I only need 500 subscribers. Another short silence ensued, which was terminated by the captain's turning roughly to the foreigner and saying, "Do you know, monsieur, that you're the first Frenchman I ever let come into my house?" Monsieur Dubois made a profound bow. He speaks no English and understands it so imperfectly that he might possibly imagine he had received a compliment. Mrs. Mervyn endeavored to divert the captain's ill humor by starting new subjects, but he left to her all the trouble of supporting them, and leaned back in his chair in gloomy silence, except when any opportunity offered of uttering some sarcasm upon the French. Finding her efforts to render the evening agreeable were fruitless, Mrs. Mervyn proposed a party to Ranelagh. Madame Duval joyfully consented to it, and the captain, though he railed against the dissipation of the women, did not oppose it. What is it?
I'm setting up a background.
and therefore Maria and I ran upstairs to dress ourselves. Before we were ready, word was brought to us that Sir Clement Willoughby was in the drawing room. He introduced himself under the pretence of inquiring after all our healths, and entered the room with the easy air of an old acquaintance, though Mrs. Mervyn confesses that he seemed embarrassed when he found how coldly he was received, not only by the captain, but by herself. I was extremely disconcerted at the thoughts of seeing this man again, and did not go downstairs till I was called to tea. He was then deeply engaged in a discourse upon French manners with Madame Duval and the captain, and the subject seemed so entirely to engross him that he did not at first observe my entrance into the room. Their conversation was supported with great vehemence, the captain roughly maintaining the superiority of the English in every particular, and Madame Duval warmly refusing to allow of it in any, while Sir Clement exerted all his powers of argument and of ridicule to second and strengthen whatever was advanced by the captain. For he had the sagacity to discover that he could take no method so effectual for making the master of the house his friend as to make Madame Duval his enemy. And indeed, in a very short time, he had reason to congratulate himself upon his successful discernment. As soon as he saw me, he made a most respectful bow, and hoped I had not suffered from the fatigue of the ridotto. I made no other answer than a slight inclination of the head, for I was very much ashamed of that whole affair. He then returned to the disputants, where he managed the argument so skilfully, at once provoking Madame Duval and delighting the captain, that I could not forbear admiring his address, though I condemned his subtlety. Mrs. Mervyn, dreading such violent antagonists, attempted frequently to change the subject, and she might have turn the page. And she might have succeeded but for the interposition of Sir Clement, who would not suffer it to be given up, and supported it with such humour and satire that he seems to have won the captain's heart, though their united forces so enraged and overpowered Madame Duval that she really trembled with passion. I was very glad when Mrs. Mervyn said it was time to be gone. Sir Clement arose to take leave, but the captain very cordially invited him to join our party. He had an engagement, he said, but he would give it up to have that pleasure. Some little confusion ensued in regard to our manner of setting off. Mrs. Mervyn offered Madame Duval a place in her coach, and proposed that we four females should go all together. However, this she rejected, declaring she would by no means go so far without a gentleman, and wondering so polite a lady could make it so English a proposal. Sir Clement Willoughby said his chariot was waiting at the door, and begged to know if it could be of any use. It was at last decided that a hackney coach should be called for Monsieur Dubois and Madame Duval, in which the captain and, at his request, Sir Clement went also. Mrs. and Miss Mrs. and Miss Mervyn and I had a peaceful and comfortable ride by ourselves. I doubt not but they quarrelled all the way, for when we met at Ranelagh everyone seemed out of humour, and although we joined parties, poor Madame Duval was avoided as much as possible by all but me. The room was so very much crowded that, but for the uncommon assiduity of Sir Clement Willoughby, we should not have been able to procure a box, which is the name given to the arched recesses that are appropriated for tea parties, till half the company had retired. As we were taking possession of our places, some ladies of Mrs. Mervyn's acquaintance stopped to speak to her, and persuaded her to take a round with them. When she returned to us, what was my surprise to see that Lord Orville had joined her party. The ladies walked on. Mrs. Mervyn seated herself and made a slight, though respectful invitation to Lord Orville to drink his tea with us, sorry, it's kind of dark, and to drink his tea with us, which, to my no small consternation, he accepted. She's so embarrassed. I felt a confusion unspeakable at again seeing him, from the recollection of the Ridotto adventure, but nor did my situation lessen it, for I was seated between Madame Duval and Sir Clement, who seemed as little who seemed as little to desire Lord Orville's presence in. Okay, I don't want that on me, sis. Oh shit! Now I lost my place. Oh my goodness!
Your
I'm
what?
sorry. Pardon my French. Where am I? Oh my heavens! Ah, the book closed on me. Okay. Indeed, the continual wrangling and ill breeding of Captain Mervyn and Madame Duval made me blush that I belonged to them, and poor Mrs. Mervyn and her amiable daughter had still less reason to be satisfied. A general silence ensued after he was seated. His appearance, from different motives, gave a universal restraint to everybody. What his own reasons were for honoring us with his company, I cannot imagine, unless, indeed, he had a curiosity to know whether I should invent any new impertinence concerning him. The first speech was made by Madame Duval, who said, "It's quite a shocking thing to see ladies come to so genteel a place as Ranelagh with hats on. It has a monstrous vulgar look. I can't think what they wear them for. There's no such a thing to be seen in Paris." "Indeed," cried Sir Clement, "I must own myself no advocate for hats. I am sorry the ladies ever invented or adopted so tantalizing a fashion, for where there is beauty they only serve to shade it, and where there is none, to excite a most unavailing curiosity. I fancy they were originally worn by some young and whimsical coquette." "More likely," answered the captain, "they were invented by some wrinkled old hag, who'd a mind for to keepen the young fellows in chase, let them be never so weary." "I don't know what you may do in England," cried Madame Duval, "but I know in Paris no woman needn't be at such trouble as that, to be taken very genteel notice of." "Why, will you pretend for to say," returned the captain, "that they don't distinguish the old from the young there as well as here?" "They don't make no distinguishments at all," said she. "They're vastly too polite." "More fools they," cried the captain sneeringly. "Would to heavens," cried Sir Clement, "that for her own sakes we Englishmen too were blessed with so accommodating a blindness." "Why the devil do you make such a prayer as that?" demanded the captain. "Them are the first foolish words I've heard you speak. But I suppose you're not much used to that sort of work. Did you ever make a prayer before, since you were a sniveller?" "I now," cried Madame Duval, "there's another of the unpoliteness of you English, to go talking of such things as that. Now in Paris nobody never says nothing about religion no more than about politics." "Why, then," answered he, "it's a sign they take no more care of their souls than of their country, and so both one and the other go to old Nick." "Well, if they do," said she, "who's the worse, so long as they don't say nothing about it? It's the tiresomest thing in the world to be always talking of them sort of things, and nobody that's ever been abroad troubles their heads about them." "Pray, then," cried the captain, "since you know so much of the matter, be so good as to tell us what they do trouble their heads about. Hey, Sir Clement, hadn't we a right to know that much?" "A very comprehensive question," said Sir Clement, "and I expect much instruction from the lady's answer." "Come, madame," continued the captain, "never flinch. Speak at once. Don't stop for thinking." "I assure you I am not going," answered she, "for as to what they do, what they've why, they've enough to do, I promise you, with that one thing or another." "But what do they do, these famous messieurs?" demanded the captain. "Can't you tell us? Do they game, or drink, or fiddle, or are they jockeys? Or do they spend all their time in flummering old women?" "As to that, sir, but indeed I shan't trouble myself to answer such a parcel of low questions, so don't ask me no more about it." And then, to my great vexation, turning to Lord Orville, she said, "Pray, sir, was you ever in Paris?" He only bowed. "And pray, sir, how did you like it?" This comprehensive question, as Sir Clement would have called it, though it made him smile, also made him hesitate. However, his answer was expressive of his approbation. I thought you would like it, sir, because you look so like a gentleman. As to the captain, and as to that other gentleman, why they may very well not like what they do not know. For I suppose, sir, you was never abroad? Only 3 years, ma'am, answered Sir Clement dryly. Well, that's very surprising. I should never have thought it. However, I dare say you only kept company with the English. Why, pray, who should he be keeping company with? Cried the captain. What, I suppose you'd have him ashamed of his own nation, like some other people not 1,000 miles off, on purpose to make his own nation ashamed of him? I'm sure it would be a very good thing if you would go abroad yourself. How will you make out that hay, madam? Come, please tell me, where would be the good of that? Where? Why, a great deal. They'd make quite another person of you. What, I suppose you'd have me learn to cut capers and dress like a monkey, and palaver in French gibberish, hey, would you, and powder and daub and make myself up like some other folks? I would have you learn to be more politer, sir, and not to talk to ladies in such a rude, old-fashioned way as this. No, sorry, let me help you. It's okay. Okay, baby. Okay. Hey, my goodness. Hey, hey. Okay, my goodness. You, sir, as have been in Paris, again addressing herself to Lord Orville, can tell this English gentleman how he'd be despised if he was to talk in such an ungenteel manner as this before any foreigners. Why, there ain't any. I'm sorry, it's kind of dark and I can't see it very good. I lost my place. Why, there isn't a hairdresser, nor a shoemaker, nor nobody that. Oh, thank you, sis. That wouldn't blush to be in your company.
Does that make the
Why,
line
look
in
ye,
the video
madam,
much better?
answered the captain. As to your hair pinchers and shoe blacks, you may puff off their manners and welcome. I am heartily glad you like 'em so well. But as to me, since you must needs make so free of your advice, I must e'en tell you I never kept company with any such gentry. Come, ladies and gentlemen, said Mrs. Mervyn, as as many of you as have done tea, I invite to walk with me. Maria and I started up instantly. Lord Orville followed, and I questioned whether we were not half round the room ere the angry disputants knew that we had left the box. As the husband of Mrs. Mervyn had borne so large a share in this disagreeable altercation, Lord Orville forbore to make any comments upon it, so that the subject was immediately dropped, and the conversation became calmly sociable and politely cheerful, and to everybody but me must have been highly agreeable. But as to myself, I was so eagerly desirous of making some apology to Lord Orville for the impertinence of which he must have thought me guilty at the ridotto, and yet so utterly unable to assume sufficient courage to speak to him concerning an affair in which I had so terribly exposed myself, that I hardly ventured to say a word all the time we were walking. Besides, the knowledge of his contemptuous opinion haunted and dispirited me, and made me fear he might possibly misconstrue whatever I might say, so that, far from enjoying a conversation which might at any other time have delighted me, I continued silent, uncomfortable, and ashamed. Oh, sir, shall I ever again involve myself in so foolish an embarrassment? I am sure that if I do, I shall deserve yet greater mortification. We were not joined by the rest of the party till we had taken 3 or 4 turns around the room, and then they were so quarrelsome that Mrs. Mervyn complained of being fatigued, and proposed going home. No one dissented. Lord Orville joined another party, having first made an offer of his services, which the gentleman declined, and we proceeded to an outward room where we waited for the carriages. It was settled that we should return to town in the same manner we came to Ranelagh, and accordingly Monsieur Dubois handed Madame Duval into a hackney coach, and was just preparing to follow her when she screamed and jumped hastily out, declaring she was wet through all her clothes. Indeed, upon examination, the coach was found to be in a dismal condition, for the weather proved very bad, and the rain had, though I know not how, made its way into the carriage. Mrs. and Miss ah, Mrs. and Miss Mervyn and myself were already disposed of as before, but no sooner did the captain hear this account, than without any ceremony he was so civil as to immediately take possession of the vacant seat in his own coach, leaving Madame Duval and Monsieur Dubois to take care of themselves. As to Sir Clement Willoughby, his own chariot was in waiting. I instantly begged permission to offer Madame Duval my own place, and made a motion to get out, but Mrs. Mervyn stopped me, saying that I should then be obliged to return to town with only the foreigner or Sir Clement. "Oh, never mind the old beldame," cried the captain. "She's weatherproof, I'll answer for her. And besides, as we are all, I hope, English, why, she'll meet with no worse than she expects from us." "I do not mean to defend her," said Mrs. Mervyn, "but indeed, as she belongs to our party, we cannot, with any decency, leave the place till she is by some means accommodated." "Lord, my dear," cried the captain, whom the distress of Madame Duval had put into very good humour, "why, she'll break her heart, if she meets with any civility from a filthy Englishman." Mrs. Mervyn, however, prevailed, and we all got out of the coach to wait till Madame Duval could meet with some better carriage. We found her, attended by Monsieur Dubois, standing amongst the servants, and very busy in wiping her negligee, and endeavouring to save it from being stained by the wet, as she said it was a new lion silk. Sir Clement Willoughby offered her the use of his chariot, but she had been too much piqued by his raillery to accept it. We waited some time, but in vain, for no hackney coach could be procured. The captain at last was persuaded to accompany Sir Clement himself, and we four females were handed into Mrs. Mervyn's carriage, though not before Madame Duval had insisted upon our making room for Monsieur Dubois, to which the captain only consented in preference to being incommoded by him in Sir Clement's chariot. Our party drove off first. We were silent and unsociable, for the difficulties attending these arrangements had made everyone languid and fatigued. Unsociable, I must own, we continued, but very short was the duration of our silence, as we had not proceeded 30 yards before every voice was heard at once, for the coach broke down. I suppose we concluded, of course, that we were all half killed by the violent shrieks that seemed to come from every mouth. The chariot was stopped, the servants came to our assistance, and we were taken out of the carriage without having been at all hurt. The night was dark and wet, but I had scarce touched the ground when I was lifted suddenly from it by Sir Clement Willoughby, who begged permission to assist me, though did not wait to have it granted, but carried me in his arms back to Ranelagh. He inquired very earnestly if I was not hurt by the accident, I assured him I was perfectly safe and free from injury, and desired he would leave me and return to the rest of the party, for I was very uneasy to know whether they had been equally fortunate. He told me he was happy in being honoured with my commands, and would joyfully execute them, but insisted upon first conducting me to a warm room, as I had not wholly escaped being wet. He did not regard any objections, but made me follow him to an apartment, where we found an excellent fire and some company waiting for carriages. I readily accepted a seat, and then begged he would go. And go indeed he did, but he returned in a moment, telling me that the rain was more violent than ever, and that he had sent his servants to offer their assistance and acquaint the Mervyns of my situation. I was very mad that he would not go himself, but as my acquaintance with him was so very slight, I did not think proper to urge him contrary to his inclination. Well, he drew a chair close to mine, and after again inquiring how I did, said in a low voice, "You will pardon me, Miss Anville, if the eagerness I feel to vindicate myself induces me to snatch this opportunity of making sincere acknowledgments for the impertinence with which I tormented you at the last ridotto. I can assure you, madam, I have been a true and sorrowful penitent ever since. But shall I tell you honestly what encouraged me to—" He stopped, but I said nothing, for I thought instantly of the conversation Miss Mervyn had overheard, and supposed he was going to tell me himself what part Lord Orville had borne in it, and really I did not wish to hear it repeated. Indeed, the rest of his speech convinces me that that was his intention, with what view I know not, except to make merit of his defending me. And yet, he continued, my excuse may only expose my own credulity, and want of judgment and penetration. I will therefore merely beseech your pardon, and hope that some future time. Just then the door was opened by Sir Clement's servant, and I had the pleasure of seeing the captain, Mrs. and Miss Mervyn enter the room. "Oh, ho!" cried the former, "you have got a good warm berth? Here, but we shall not beat up your quarters. Here, Lucy, Moll, come to the fire and dry your trumpery. But, heyday, what, where's the old Madame French?" "Goodness!" cried I, "is not Madame Duval then with you?" "With me? No, thank God." I was very uneasy to know what might have become of her, and if they would have suffered me, I should have gone out in search of her myself. But all the servants were dispatched to find her, and the captain said we might be very sure her French beau would take care of her. We waited some time without any tidings, and were soon the only party in the room. My uneasiness increased so much that Sir Clement now made a voluntary offer of seeking her. However, the same moment that he opened the door with this design, she presented herself at it, attended by Monsieur Dubois. "I was this instant, madam," said he, "coming to see for you." "You are mighty good, truly," cried she, "to come when all the mischief's over." She then entered in such a condition, entirely covered with mud, and in so great a rage, it was with difficulty she could speak. We all expressed our concern, and offered her our assistance, except the captain, who no sooner beheld her than he burst into a loud laugh. We endeavoured by our inquiries and condolements to prevent her attending to him, and she was for some time so wholly engrossed by her anger and her distress that we succeeded without much trouble. We begged her to inform us how this accident had happened. "How?" repeated she. "Why, it was all along of you were all going away, and there poor Monsieur Dubois. But it wasn't his fault, for he's as bad off as me." All eyes were then turned round to Monsieur Dubois, whose clothes were in the same miserable plight with those of Madame Duval, and who, wet, shivering, and disconsolate, had crept to the fire. The captain laughed yet more heartily, while Miss Mervyn, ashamed of his rudeness, repeated her inquiries to Madame Duval, who answered, "Why, as we were coming along, all in the rain, Monsieur Dubois was so obliging, though I'm sure it was an unlucky obligingness for me, as to lift me up in his arms, to carry me over a place that was ankle deep in mud, but instead of my being ever the better for it, just as we were in the worst part, I'm sure I wish we had been 50 miles off, for somehow or another his foot slipped, at least I suppose so, though I can't think how it happened, for I'm no such great weight. But however that was, down we both came together, all in the mud, and the more we tried to get up, the more deeper we got covered with the nastiness, and my new lion's negligee
You
too,
like
quite
my background?
spoilt. Oh, you're showing off. Oh, my sales trophy. However, it's well we got up at all, for we might have laid there till now for aught all you cared, for nobody never came near us. This recital put the captain into an ecstasy. He went from the lady to the gentleman, and from the gentleman to the lady, to enjoy alternately the sight of their distress. He really shouted with pleasure, and shaking Monsieur Dubois strenuously by the hand, wished him the joy of having touched English ground. And then he held a candle to Madame Duval that he might have a more complete view of her disaster, declaring repeatedly that he had never been better pleased in his life. I'm sorry, this is such a... the light's bad, and the angle's bad, and the computer's propped up on my knees. The rage of poor Madame Duval was unspeakable. She dashed the candle out of his hand, stamped upon the floor, and at last spat in his face. This action seemed immediately to calm them both, as the joy of the captain was converted into resentment, and the wrath of Madame Duval into fear. For he put his hands upon her shoulders, and gave her so violent a shake that she screamed out for help, assuring her at the same time that if she had been 1 ounce less old or less ugly, she should have had it all returned on her own face. Monsieur Dubois, who had seated himself very quietly at the fire, approached them and expostulated very warmly with the captain, but he was neither understood nor regarded, and Madame Duval was not released till she quite sobbed with passion. When they were parted, I entreated her to permit the woman who has the charge of the ladies' cloaks to assist in drying her clothes. She consented, and we did what was possible to save her from catching cold. We were obliged to wait in this disagreeable situation near an hour before a hackney coach could be found, and then we were disposed in the same manner as before our accident. I am going this morning to see poor Madame Duval and to inquire after her health, though I think she must have suffered by last night's misfortunes, though indeed she seems to be naturally strong and hearty. Adieu, my dear sir, till tomorrow. Wow, that was a long one. I might just leave it there because, oh yeah, it's been more than half an hour. Yeah, we'll just pick up chapter 17 tomorrow. So I'm so tired. Oh my goodness. And I'm sick. Hopefully, if I maybe Caden. Oh my goodness. What are you doing? Why are you making faces? That's embarrassing. Hopefully, Caden's going to let me sleep tonight, and that would be amazing. Maybe I'll feel better tomorrow. Look, I don't want you to poke your tongue out at the people who are watching my channel. Kalissa, don't, sis. That's rude. Anyway, we will see you tomorrow. Thanks for stopping by. Good night. Goodbye. See you next time.